Maria Santos adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and carefully shelved another book in the small-town library of Cedar Falls, Montana. At 32, she had become as much a fixture of the building as the old oak reading tables and the grandfather clock that chimed every hour. Patrons knew her as the soft-spoken woman who could find any book, recommend the perfect novel, and maintain absolute silence even when children ran through the aisles. What they didn't know was that Maria had once been Staff Sergeant Santos of the United States Marine Corps, one of the most deadly accurate snipers the military had ever trained. The morning of October 15th started like any other. Maria unlocked the library doors at 8 sharp, brewed her usual pot of coffee, and settled behind the circulation desk with a stack of returned books. Cedar Falls was the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happened, which was exactly why Maria had chosen it after her discharge 3 years ago. She needed peace, quiet, and distance from the memories that haunted her dreams. Mrs. Henderson shuffled in first, as she did every Tuesday, looking for the latest romance novel. "Morning, dear," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Any new books come in?" Maria smiled warmly. "Just got in the newest Nicholas Sparks yesterday. It's on the new releases shelf." As Mrs. Henderson made her way to the shelf, Maria's trained eyes automatically scanned the library's exits and windows, a habit she couldn't shake. Even in this peaceful setting, her military training never fully switched off. She noticed everything: the delivery truck parked across the street, the maintenance worker fixing the streetlight, the way the morning sun created shadows between the buildings. Around 10 o'clock, 3 kindergarten classes arrived for story time. Maria loved this part of her job. Sitting in the children's section, surrounded by bright picture books and small chairs, she read The Very Hungry Caterpillar to 28 excited 5-year-olds. Their teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, always marveled at how Maria could hold their attention so completely. "You have such a gentle way with them," Ms. Rodriguez whispered as the children colored pictures of butterflies afterward. "Have you thought about working with children full-time?" Maria simply smiled and helped a little girl named Emma choose the right crayon for her butterfly's wings. She had learned that the less she revealed about her past, the more peaceful her present remained. Nobody in Cedar Falls knew about her military service, her 3 tour in Afghanistan, or the classified missions that had earned her commendations she kept locked in a storage unit across town. The lunch hour brought its usual crowd of office workers and students from the nearby community college. Maria processed returns, answered questions about overdue fees, and helped a young man find resources for his history paper on World War II. When he asked if she knew much about military history, she simply directed him to the appropriate section and suggested several reliable sources. By 2 o'clock, the library had settled into its afternoon quiet. Only a few regular patrons remained. Old Mr. Patterson reading his daily newspapers in the corner chair, college student Sarah working on her laptop, and Tom Miller, the local mechanic, browsing through automotive repair manuals on his lunch break. Maria was entering new acquisitions into the computer system when she heard the first sound that made her blood run cold. It was the distinctive whistle of a bullet cutting through air, followed immediately by the crash of breaking glass. The large front window of the library exploded inward, sending shards across the wooden floor. Training kicked in before conscious thought. Maria dropped behind the circulation desk, her body automatically assuming a defensive position she had practiced thousands of times. Her mind instantly began analyzing the situation: trajectory of the shot, likely position of the shooter, potential escape routes, civilian safety. "Everyone down," she shouted with an authority that made every person in the library immediately drop to the floor. The gentle librarian was gone, replaced by the combat veteran who had survived 3 tours in hostile territory. Another shot shattered the window of the reading room, then another. Maria's trained ear could tell the shots were coming from an elevated position across the street, probably the office building that housed the insurance agency and law firm. The shooter was using a high-powered rifle, likely a hunting rifle based on the sound signature. Mrs. Henderson was crying softly behind the romance novel shelf. Mr. Patterson had pressed himself against the wall, his face pale with shock. Sarah had crawled under a reading table, clutching her laptop bag like a shield. Tom Miller was trying to calm Mrs. Henderson while staying low himself. Maria's mind raced through tactical assessments. The library's layout provided decent cover, but they were trapped. The back exit led to an alley, but reaching it would require crossing open space visible from the shooter's position. The basement was accessible through a door near the reference section, but it would mean moving civilians through potential lines of fire. Her cell phone was in her purse under the desk. Moving carefully, staying below the window line, she managed to reach it and dial 911. Cedar Falls Emergency Services. This is the public library on Main Street. We have an active shooter situation. Multiple shots fired from the office building across the street. Approximately 5 civilians inside the library taking cover. I need immediate police and medical response. Ma'am, are you injured? Are others injured? Maria did a quick visual assessment of her civilians. No injuries at this time. We're in defensive positions. Tell responding officers the shooter appears to be on the 2nd or 3rd floor of the building across Main Street, East Side. How do you know that, ma'am? Maria caught herself before revealing her military expertise. Just a guess based on the angle of the shots. Please hurry. The emergency dispatcher kept her on the line while coordinating the response. Maria could hear sirens in the distance, but they would need several minutes to arrive and secure the scene. In combat situations, several minutes could be an eternity. A 4th shot struck the wall above the circulation desk, sending plaster dust raining down. The shooter was adjusting his aim, trying to hit targets behind cover. Maria realized with growing alarm that this wasn't random violence. The pattern of shots suggested someone with at least basic marksmanship training, someone who understood how to pin down targets and prevent escape. Maria, Sarah's voice was shaky from under the table. What do we do? Before Maria could answer, she heard something that made her heart stop, the sound of footsteps on the library's front steps. Heavy boots moving with purpose. The shooter wasn't content to attack from distance. He was coming inside to finish what he started. Maria's training had prepared her for many scenarios, but she had never imagined having to protect civilians in her peaceful library. She had no weapon, no backup, no tactical advantage except her knowledge and experience. But as the footsteps reached the library's front door, she knew she would use every skill the Marine Corps had taught her to keep these innocent people alive. The gentle librarian who read stories to children and helped elderly patrons find books was about to become something she had tried to leave behind. But some skills, once learned, never truly disappear. They just wait quietly beneath the surface until the moment they're desperately needed. The front door handle turned slowly, and Maria Santos prepared to fight for lives that had been entrusted to her care. Even though none of them knew, she was the only person in Cedar Falls capable of matching a trained killer shot for shot. They were about to discover that their quiet librarian had secrets that could save them all, if she could remember how to be the warrior she used to be. The door opened with a creak that seemed to echo through the silent library, and Maria's new life collided violently with the skills from her old one. In the next few moments, the people of Cedar Falls would learn that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody suspects. The man who stepped through the shattered doorway wore military-style clothing and carried a hunting rifle with practiced confidence. Maria recognized the stance, the grip, the way he moved with his weapon ready. This wasn't some disturbed amateur. This was someone with training, someone who knew what he was doing. From her position behind the circulation desk, Maria watched him scan the library interior. His eyes moved systematically, checking corners and potential hiding spots with military precision. When his gaze passed over her hiding spot, she pressed herself lower, grateful for the solid oak construction of the old desk. "I know you're all in here," the man called out, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. "This doesn't have to be difficult. I'm looking for someone specific. The rest of you can walk out of here if you cooperate." Maria's mind worked furiously. The systematic shooting, the tactical approach, the claim he was looking for someone specific, this felt personal, not random. But who in peaceful Cedar Falls could possibly be the target of such violence? Mrs. Henderson's quiet crying had stopped, replaced by the kind of terrified silence that comes when death feels close. Mr. Patterson remained pressed against the wall, barely breathing. Sarah stayed frozen under her table, and Tom Miller had positioned himself protectively near Mrs. Henderson, though he had no idea what protection he could actually offer. "Maria Santos," the gunman called out suddenly, and Maria's blood turned to ice. "I know you're here. Your car is in the parking lot. Maria Santos, United States Marine Corps, service number 2,847,391. 3 tour in Afghanistan, sniper school graduate, 47 confirmed kills. The words hit Maria like physical blows. Someone had found her. Someone had tracked down her carefully hidden past and followed her to this quiet sanctuary she had built. The other civilians in the library had no idea what those numbers meant, but Maria knew exactly what 47 confirmed kills represented in terms of skill, training, and lethality. You have 30 seconds to show yourself, Sergeant Santos, or I start shooting civilians, beginning with the old lady behind the romance novels. Mrs. Henderson's sharp intake of breath was audible across the silent library. Maria closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She had left the military to escape exactly this kind of life-or-death decision-making, but the choice was being forced upon her anyway. 20 seconds, Sergeant. Maria's tactical mind assessed her options rapidly. The gunman stood approximately 20 feet from her position, between her and the front exit. He had positioned himself with clear sight lines to most of the library while keeping the entrance behind him as an escape route. Professional positioning. Her concealment behind the desk was solid, but temporary. The desk had probably been built in the 1950s, solid hardwood that could stop most handgun rounds but wouldn't necessarily stop a high-powered rifle. She needed to move, but moving meant exposing herself and potentially the civilians. 10 seconds. The gunman raised his rifle toward Mrs. Henderson's hiding spot. Maria saw Tom Miller tense, preparing to do something brave and stupid that would get him killed. She couldn't let that happen. These people had become her responsibility the moment the first shot was fired. Wait, Maria called out, slowly rising from behind the desk with her hands visible. I'm here, let them go. The gunman's rifle swung toward her, and Maria found herself staring down a barrel for the first time in 3 years. The feeling was horribly familiar. There she is, the famous ghost of Helmand Province. You were harder to find than I expected. Maria kept her voice calm and level. Who are you? What do you want? Captain James Morrison, Army Rangers. Though I guess you wouldn't remember me personally. You killed my brother in Afghanistan. The name Morrison triggered a memory, but Maria forced herself to focus on the immediate threat. I followed rules of engagement. Every shot I took was authorized and legitimate. Legitimate? Morrison's voice rose dangerously. You put a bullet through Staff Sergeant David Morrison from 800 yards while he was trying to rescue wounded soldiers. You murdered him in cold blood. Maria remembered now. The intelligence had been solid. A Taliban operative in stolen American gear was moving to ambush a medevac helicopter. The shot had been clean, necessary, and saved 12 lives. But if David Morrison had been the man in her crosshairs, it meant the intelligence had been wrong. I was given target identification by command, Maria said carefully. I was told the target was enemy combatant moving to attack medical evacuation. Lies, Morrison screamed. You killed an American hero and then the military covered it up, classified the whole operation. My family never even learned the truth about how David died. Maria kept her hands visible while her mind worked through possibilities. Morrison was emotional, angry, but still maintaining tactical discipline. He had found her civilian identity, tracked her to Cedar Falls, and planned this confrontation carefully. This wasn't a spontaneous action born of grief. This was a calculated revenge mission. Captain Morrison, there are innocent people here. Whatever you think I did, they had no part in it. Let them leave and we can settle this between us. No witnesses, Morrison said flatly. The military taught us both that rule. No witnesses, no complications. Maria felt her stomach drop. Morrison wasn't planning to let anyone leave alive. This wasn't just about revenge against her. It was about erasing any evidence of what he had done here. The tactical gear, the systematic approach, the elimination of witnesses. Morrison was applying military methodology to a personal vendetta. Mrs. Henderson, Maria called out without taking her eyes off Morrison. I need you to listen very carefully. When I say the word butterfly, I want you to run for the back door as fast as you can. Tom, help her. Mr. Patterson, Sarah, all of you together. Don't look back, don't hesitate, just run. Morrison's rifle remained trained on Maria. Clever, Sergeant, but those civilians won't make it 5 steps before I cut them down. Maybe, Maria said, but you'll have to choose between shooting them or shooting me, and if you choose them, I'll be coming for you. For the first time since entering the library, Morrison's confidence flickered. Something in Maria's voice and her stance reminded him that he was facing someone who had survived 3 combat tours and earned a reputation that followed her into civilian life. "You're unarmed," he pointed out. "Am I?" Maria asked quietly. Morrison's eyes narrowed, trying to determine if she was bluffing. The truth was, Maria had no weapon except her training and her knowledge of the library's layout. But in that moment, she realized something important. She did have one advantage Morrison couldn't account for. She knew exactly where everything was in this library. Every book, every shelf, every piece of furniture. She had walked these aisles thousands of times, reorganized sections, shifted furniture for programs. This was her territory now, as familiar to her as any military base had ever been. More importantly, she could see something Morrison couldn't from his position. The antique letter opener on the reference desk, the heavy bronze bookend on the display table, and the fire axe mounted in the emergency case near the children's section. None of these were conventional weapons, but Maria had been trained to use anything as a weapon when necessary. "You know what the real difference is between us, Captain?" Maria asked, taking a small step to her left, angling toward better cover behind a support pillar. "What's that, Sergeant?" "You came here for revenge. I'm here to protect people. That changes everything about how this ends." Morrison's finger moved to his trigger. "You're right, this is how it ends." But as he spoke, Maria heard the sound she had been waiting for, multiple police sirens, very close now. Morrison heard them too, and his eyes flicked toward the broken front window. In that split second of divided attention, Maria moved. 3 years of civilian life hadn't erased muscle memory drilled into her through countless hours of combat training. She dove left, rolled behind the support pillar, and immediately began moving toward the reference desk where the letter opener waited. Morrison's shot splintered wood where she had been standing. "Butterfly," Maria shouted as she moved. Chaos erupted in the library. Mrs. Henderson, Tom Miller, Mr. Patterson, and Sarah all began running for the back exit, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Morrison spun toward them, having to choose between multiple targets exactly as Maria had predicted. But Maria was already moving again, using her knowledge of every sight line in the building to stay in his blind spots while closing distance to anything she could use as a weapon. The gentle librarian had completely disappeared, replaced by a warrior who understood that sometimes violence was the only way to protect peace. The real fight was just beginning, and Morrison was about to learn why Maria Santos had earned her reputation in the mountains of Afghanistan. In the next few moments, he would discover that bringing war to a small-town library had been the last mistake of his military career. Morrison made the tactical error Maria had hoped for. Faced with multiple moving targets, he chose to fire at the fleeing civilians rather than maintain focus on the greater threat. His shot went wide, striking the wall near the back door as Tom Miller helped Mrs. Henderson through the exit. Maria used that moment of divided attention to reach the reference desk. Her hand closed around the antique letter opener, 8 inches of sharp steel with a heavy brass handle. It wasn't much against a rifle, but it was better than nothing. More importantly, she was now positioned with the tall reference stacks between her and Morrison, giving her cover and multiple movement options. "You can't hide forever, Santos," Morrison called out, his voice echoing strangely among the book-filled shelves. "This place only has so many exits." He was right about the exits, but wrong about hiding. Maria wasn't hiding anymore. She was hunting. Moving silently between the stacks, she began to use the library's layout against him. The building had been designed in 1923, with high shelves creating natural corridors and blind spots that Maria knew by heart. Police sirens wailed outside, growing louder. Morrison would know his time was limited. Desperate men made mistakes, and Maria intended to capitalize on everyone. She moved through the biography section, staying low, using the heavy wooden shelves as both cover and concealment. Her soft-soled shoes made no sound on the carpet as she worked her way toward a position that would give her a clear approach to Morrison's location. Morrison fired twice more, trying to flush her out. The bullets struck shelves near where she had been, sending books tumbling to the floor. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the familiar scent of old paper and binding glue, creating a surreal contrast between violence and sanctuary. 47 confirmed kills, Morrison called out, his voice closer now. He was moving too, hunting her as she hunted him. That's what your record says, 47 enemy combatants, but David wasn't the enemy, he was your own side. Maria paused behind the World War II section, listening to Morrison's position. His voice was coming from near the periodical area, maybe 30 feet away. She could hear him moving, his boots making small sounds on the wooden floor where the carpeting ended. I read your commendations, Santos. Exceptional accuracy under extreme conditions, demonstrated ability to engage targets at extended range with minimal collateral damage. That last part is interesting, isn't it? Minimal collateral damage. So why did you kill an American soldier? Maria knew Morrison was trying to provoke her into revealing her position by answering. She also knew he was working through his own tactical problem. How to find and eliminate a trained sniper in an environment full of concealment, with limited time before police arrived. She moved again, this time toward the children's section where the emergency fire axe was mounted. It would be a significant upgrade from the letter opener, but reaching it meant crossing open space visible from multiple angles. She needed to time it perfectly. The sound of breaking glass came from the front of the library. Police were arriving, but they would need time to assess the situation and establish a perimeter. Standard protocol would be to surround the building and attempt communication before entry. That gave her maybe 5 more minutes to end this before innocent cops walked into a crossfire. "Police are here, Captain," Maria called out, staying in motion. "Time to surrender." "Wrong answer, Sergeant. I didn't come this far to surrender." Morrison's voice was moving toward the back of the library, probably trying to reach the emergency exit that the civilians had used. If he got outside, he could engage the police from a position of advantage. Maria couldn't let that happen. She made her decision and broke cover, sprinting across the open space toward the children's section. Morrison spotted the movement and fired, but Maria was already diving behind a low shelf as his bullet shattered the glass case containing the fire axe. Perfect, the case was already broken. Maria grabbed the axe as Morrison's footsteps pounded across the floor toward her position. The weapon felt good in her hands, balanced and purposeful. She had trained with various weapons in the military, but had never expected to need an axe in combat. Improvisation was key to survival. Morrison appeared around the corner of the shelf, rifle raised, just as Maria swung the axe in a horizontal arc. The blade bit deep into the wooden stock of his rifle, splitting it and sending the weapon flying from his hands. Morrison stumbled backward off balance, reaching for the sidearm holstered on his hip. But Maria was already moving forward, staying inside his reach where the pistol would be harder to use effectively. She drove the blunt end of the axe handle into his solar plexus, doubling him over, then brought her knee up into his face as he folded forward. Morrison fell backward, blood streaming from his nose, but he was tough and well-trained. Even stunned, he managed to draw his pistol and fire. The shot went wild as Maria knocked his arm aside with the axe handle, then stepped in close and drove her elbow into his temple. The pistol clattered across the floor as Morrison collapsed among the scattered children's books. Maria quickly kicked the weapon away and pressed the sharp edge of the fire axe against his throat. "Don't move," she said quietly. "Don't even breathe hard." Morrison's eyes were unfocused, but he was conscious. Blood dripped from his nose onto the bright pages of Goodnight Moon. The symbolism would have been funny if the situation weren't so serious. "It's over, Captain," Maria said. "Your brother died in a war zone. It was a mistake, a tragedy, but it was war. This," she gestured around the destroyed library with its broken glass and bullet holes, "this is just murder." Police voices were calling from outside, demanding communication. They would be inside soon, and Maria needed Morrison secure before they arrived. She couldn't risk him grabbing another weapon or taking a hostage when the entry team came through. Using her belt, Maria quickly bound Morrison's hands behind his back, then checked him for additional weapons. She found a backup knife in his boot and tossed it aside. Military thoroughness, even in civilian situations. "Cedar Falls Police, is anyone inside?" "This is Maria Santos," she called back. "I'm a civilian. The gunman is secure and disarmed. One suspect down, no additional threats. I'm unarmed and moving to the front entrance." She left Morrison tied up in the children's section and walked toward the broken front door, her hands visible and empty. The fire axe remained beside Morrison as evidence. As she moved through the library, Maria surveyed the damage. Shattered windows, bullet holes in walls and shelves, books scattered across the floor, furniture overturned. Her peaceful sanctuary had been violated, turned into a battlefield. But more importantly, everyone had survived. Mrs. Henderson, Tom Miller, Mr. Patterson, Sarah, they were all safe because Maria had remembered how to be what she used to be. 4 police officers entered through the front door, weapons drawn, moving in tactical formation. Maria recognized the professionalism, the careful clearing of corners and potential threats. Good cops, properly trained. "Ma'am, we need you to get on the ground with your hands behind your head," the lead officer commanded. Maria complied immediately, understanding the protocol. Until they could sort out who was who, everyone was a potential threat. She lay flat on the carpet where she had read stories to children just hours earlier, feeling the surreal nature of how quickly life could change. "The suspect is in the children's section, hands bound, unconscious but breathing," she called out as they approached her with handcuffs. "There's a damaged rifle near the reference desk and a pistol somewhere in the children's area. No other suspects." They cuffed her gently but efficiently, then helped her to a sitting position while 2 officers went to secure Morrison. The lead officer, a sergeant in his 40s, knelt beside her. "Ma'am, we're going to need a full statement about what happened here. Are you injured?" "No injuries," Maria replied. "But Sergeant, the man you're arresting is Captain James Morrison, Army Rangers. This was a targeted attack related to military service. You'll want to contact federal authorities." The sergeant's eyebrows raised. "Military? Ma'am, what exactly is your background?" Before Maria could answer, one of the other officers called from the children's section. "Sergeant Rodriguez, you need to see this. Suspect is secured, but he's got military ID and what looks like a target folder with photos and documents." Sergeant Rodriguez looked at Maria with new interest. "Ma'am, I think we're going to need a very long conversation. But first, are you telling me you took down an armed soldier with a fire axe?" Maria met his gaze steadily. "I'm telling you I protected the people in my library. How I did it isn't really important." But Rodriguez could see in her eyes that there was much more to this story. The gentle librarian who sat cuffed on the floor had moved and fought like someone with serious training. The positioning of the suspect, the tactical awareness she had shown, the calm way she had handled the arrest situation, none of it matched with a civilian librarian. Outside, paramedics were checking on Mrs. Henderson and the other civilians who had escaped. News vehicles were arriving, along with federal agents who would want to understand how a military targeting operation had ended up in small-town Montana. The quiet life Maria had built for herself was about to become very public. But as she sat in the ruins of her library, Maria felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years: pride in what she could accomplish when it mattered most. She had saved lives today using skills she had tried to bury. Maybe running from who she used to be hadn't been the answer. Maybe the answer was finding a way to use those skills for protection instead of destruction. The investigation was just beginning, but the fight was over. And for the first time since leaving the military, Maria Santos felt like she might be ready to stop hiding from who she really was. 3 hours later, Maria sat in the Cedar Falls Police Department interview room, still wearing her library clothes but now with a borrowed police jacket over her torn blouse. FBI agent Sarah Chen sat across from her, a thick file folder open between them on the metal table. "Gunnery Sergeant Maria Santos," Agent Chen read from the file. "Not Staff Sergeant, as Captain Morrison claimed. Multiple commendations for exceptional service, including the Navy Cross for actions during Operation Mountain Storm. Honorable discharge following injury sustained during IED attack." Maria nodded, but said nothing. She had learned long ago that investigators preferred to reveal what they already knew before asking for additional information. "What's interesting, Sergeant Santos, is that Captain Morrison's version of events doesn't match any official records. According to his service file, his brother Staff Sergeant David Morrison died in a vehicle accident during a supply convoy in Kandahar province. No record of any sniper engagement, no classified operations in the area Morrison claimed." Agent Chen turned a page in the file. "But here's what we did find. Captain Morrison has been suffering from severe PTSD since returning from deployment. He's been obsessed with his brother's death, convinced there was a conspiracy to hide the truth. His family has been trying to get him treatment for 2 years." Maria absorbed this information silently. It explained a lot about Morrison's behavior, his tactical planning combined with emotional instability. PTSD could create elaborate false narratives that seemed completely real to the person experiencing them. The target folder Morrison brought with him contains photographs of you, your address, your work schedule, and detailed plans for this attack. He's been stalking you for months, Sergeant. The question is, why did he choose you specifically as the person responsible for his brother's death? I don't know, Maria answered honestly. I never served with anyone named Morrison. I've never even been to Kandahar province. My deployments were all in Helmand. Agent Chen nodded. That's what your service record shows, but Morrison's delusion was very specific. He somehow connected you to his brother's death and convinced himself that you were part of a cover-up. We're still investigating how he identified you as his target. The interview room door opened, and Sergeant Rodriguez entered with a cup of coffee and a legal pad covered in notes. He set the coffee in front of Maria and took a seat beside Agent Chen. The civilians you protected are all giving statements, he said. Mrs. Henderson, Tom Miller, Mr. Patterson, and Sarah Martinez. They all want to thank you personally, but we're keeping them separated for now to avoid contaminating their testimony. Maria sipped the coffee, grateful for the warmth. How is Mrs. Henderson? She was terrified. Shaken up but physically fine. She keeps asking if you're okay, actually. Says you saved all their lives. Sergeant Rodriguez consulted his notes. Tom Miller is calling you a hero. Says he was about to try something stupid when you took control of the situation. Agent Chen leaned forward. That brings us to the important questions, Sergeant. Your actions today demonstrated advanced tactical knowledge and combat skills. The way you managed civilians under fire, assessed the threat, and neutralized an armed attacker, that's not standard civilian behavior. I had military training, Maria said simply. Yes, but your record shows you were a sniper, not infantry or special forces. Snipers are trained for precision shooting, reconnaissance, and stealth. They're not typically trained in close quarters combat with improvised weapons. Rodriguez added, the way you took down Morrison using the library layout to your advantage, staying calm under pressure, that's next-level stuff. Where did you learn to fight like that? Maria was quiet for a long moment, considering how much to reveal. Her classified service record contained operations that were still sensitive, missions that couldn't be discussed even in an FBI interview. But these investigators had earned the right to understand at least part of the truth. I wasn't just a sniper, she said finally. I was part of a special operations unit that conducted long-range reconnaissance in denied territories. We worked alone or in very small teams, often without support for extended periods. The training included survival skills, close-quarters combat, and what to do when your primary weapon wasn't available. Agent Chen made notes. So when Morrison entered the library, you automatically reverted to that training. Not automatically. I tried to avoid it. Maria's voice was quiet. I came to Cedar Falls to get away from that life. I wanted to be normal, peaceful. I thought if I could just help people find books and read stories to children, I could forget about the other things I knew how to do. But you couldn't, Rodriguez observed. When Morrison threatened Mrs. Henderson, when he said he was going to kill innocent people to get to me, I couldn't let that happen. So I became who I used to be, just long enough to stop him. Agent Chen closed the file folder. Sergeant Santos, I need to ask you directly. Have you had any contact with Captain Morrison before today? Any interaction that might have given him cause to target you? None whatsoever. I've never seen him before in my life. What about the name David Morrison? Does that trigger any memories from your service? Maria thought carefully. I've reviewed every engagement I was involved in during my 3 tour. I never encountered anyone named Morrison, enemy or friendly. I never fired on American forces, never had friendly fire incidents. My record is clean. Rodriguez looked puzzled. So this whole thing was based on a delusion. Morrison created an entire fantasy about you being responsible for his brother's death. Agent Chen nodded grimly. PTSD can create false memories that feel completely real to the person experiencing them. Morrison's therapist noted that he was having vivid dreams about his brother's death, dreams that became more elaborate and detailed over time. Eventually, he convinced himself they were recovered memories of actual events. But why me specifically? Maria asked. There are thousands of snipers who served in Afghanistan. How did he pick my name? Agent Chen opened the file again and pulled out a newspaper clipping. This is from the Billings Gazette 3 months ago. Local librarian organizes veterans reading program. The article mentions your military service and includes a photo. Maria remembered the article. She had started a book club for veterans, hoping to help other people transitioning to civilian life. The program had been successful enough that the local paper had written a small story about it. Morrison's mother found this article while researching veteran support programs. She thought it might help her son to connect with other veterans dealing with similar issues. She showed him the article, and somehow his damaged mind connected you to his brother's death. The cruel irony hit Maria like a physical blow. Her attempt to help other veterans had led a disturbed man directly to her. Her act of compassion had nearly resulted in the deaths of innocent people. "It's not your fault," Agent Chen said, recognizing Maria's expression. "Morrison's illness created this situation, not your kindness toward other veterans." Rodriguez added, "Speaking of veterans, we've had calls from several people in town who didn't know about your military background. Word is getting out about what happened today. There's already a crowd gathering outside the library with flowers and thank you signs." Maria felt overwhelmed. For 3 years, she had carefully maintained her privacy, kept her military service separate from her civilian life. Now everyone would know. The quiet anonymity she had treasured was gone forever. "What happens to Morrison?" she asked. "Federal charges for domestic terrorism, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder," Agent Chen replied. "He'll get treatment for his PTSD, but he's going to prison for a very long time. What he did today was inexcusable, regardless of his mental state." "And me?" "You're free to go, Sergeant. Self-defense and defense of others. The prosecutor has already reviewed the preliminary evidence and cleared you of any wrongdoing. In fact, the mayor wants to give you a commendation." Maria laughed, a sound without humor. "A commendation for destroying my own library." Rodriguez smiled. "The library can be repaired. The people you saved can't be replaced. Mrs. Henderson has been telling anyone who will listen that you're a guardian angel. Tom Miller says he's going to name his expected baby after you." Agent Chen stood and extended her hand. "Sergeant Santos, on behalf of the FBI and the people you protected today, thank you for your service, both in the military and here in Cedar Falls." Maria shook her hand, still processing everything that had happened. In one violent afternoon, her carefully constructed civilian identity had been shattered and rebuilt. She was no longer just the quiet librarian. She was the warrior who had saved lives, whether she wanted that identity or not. As they prepared to release her, Rodriguez had one final question. "What are you going to do now? The library will be closed for weeks while they repair the damage." Maria thought about Mrs. Henderson's terror, Tom Miller's bravery, Morrison's tortured mind, and the newspaper clipping that had started this whole nightmare. She thought about the veterans' reading group and how many other soldiers were struggling with invisible wounds. "I think," she said slowly, "it's time to stop hiding from who I am. Maybe Cedar Falls needs someone who understands both books and battles. Maybe I can help other veterans before their pain turns into something like this." It was a decision that would change her life again, but this time by choice rather than circumstance. Maria Santos was ready to integrate all parts of herself, the librarian and the warrior, into someone who could serve her community in ways she had never imagined possible. 6 months after the library incident, Maria Santos stood on the roof of the Cedar Falls Community Center, adjusting the scope on a specialized rifle that looked nothing like the weapons she had carried in Afghanistan. This rifle was painted bright orange and fired paint pellets instead of bullets. Below her, a crowd of over 200 people had gathered for the town's annual summer festival. The transformation had been remarkable. After the story of the library attack made national news, donations had poured in from across the country. The library had been rebuilt with modern security features, expanded computer labs, and a dedicated Veterans Resource Center. Maria had been hired as the Director of Community Outreach, a position that combined her love of helping people with her unique background. "You sure about this, Maria?" called Tom Miller from the crowd below. His baby daughter, Maria Elena Miller, gurgled happily in his arms. "That's a pretty ambitious target." Maria grinned down at him. "The target was a small red balloon attached to a weather vane on top of the old grain elevator, nearly 600 yards away across town. The wind was gusting at 15 miles per hour, and the balloon was dancing unpredictably in the air currents. "She's got this," Mrs. Henderson called out confidently. At 83, the elderly woman had become one of Maria's biggest supporters. She wore a T-shirt that read "Library Warriors" and carried a sign promoting the Veterans Reading Program. The summer festival had become Cedar Falls' way of celebrating not just the season, but their community's resilience. The paint pellet shooting exhibition was Maria's idea, a way to demonstrate that the skills she had learned in war could be used for entertainment and education in peace. All proceeds from the event would go to veteran mental health programs. Agent Sarah Chen stood in the crowd with her own family, having maintained a friendship with Maria since the investigation. She understood better than most how difficult it had been for Maria to find a way to honor her military identity without being defined solely by violence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Johnson announced through a portable microphone, "what you're about to see is a demonstration of the extraordinary precision that Gunnery Sergeant Maria Santos developed during her military service. The target balloon is approximately 600 yards away, roughly the length of 6 football fields. The wind conditions are challenging, and the target is moving unpredictably." Maria settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar ritual of breath control and mental focus. But this time, instead of the weight of life-and-death decisions, she felt only the joy of sharing her skills with a community that had embraced all aspects of who she was. Through her scope, she could see the tiny red balloon bobbing and weaving against the blue summer sky. The wind was tricky, coming in gusts from multiple directions as it channeled between buildings. She would need to time the shot perfectly to account for both wind drift and the balloon's movement. "The amazing thing about Sergeant Santos," Mayor Johnson continued his commentary, "is that she's using these same skills to help other veterans in our community. Her precision and patience have been just as valuable in counseling sessions as they were in military operations." Maria tuned out the crowd noise and focused on reading the wind patterns. She watched the grain elevators flag, the way dust swirled in the streets, the movement of tree branches at various distances. Her mind automatically calculated angles, wind speed, and target movement, skills that had once been used to protect soldiers and now entertained families. Sarah Martinez, the college student who had hidden under a table during the library attack, was now working part-time at the Veterans Center. She had changed her major to psychology after witnessing how trauma affected Captain Morrison and how healing was possible with proper support. She stood with her camera ready, documenting the event for the center's newsletter. "On 3, Maria called out, settling her breathing into the rhythm she had perfected over years of training. 1. The crowd fell silent. Even the children stopped chattering, sensing the importance of the moment. This wasn't just about hitting a target. It was about demonstrating that weapons skills could be transformed into something positive, that a warrior's precision could serve community rather than destruction. 2. Maria felt the wind shift slightly, saw the balloon drift to the left of her aim point. She made a minute adjustment to her scope, compensating for the wind change. The mathematics of ballistics were as natural to her as the alphabet, calculations performed at a subconscious level. In the crowd, Mr. Patterson held his breath. The elderly man had become a regular at the library's Veterans Reading Group, finding books about World War II that helped him process his own combat experiences from decades earlier. He understood what precision meant in military terms and had tremendous respect for Maria's abilities. 3. The paint pellet left the rifle with a soft pop that was barely audible over the wind. 600 yards away, the tiny red balloon exploded in a splash of bright orange paint that was visible even at that distance. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause that could be heard across half the town. Maria stood and waved, but her attention was already shifting to the next part of the demonstration. She had arranged for several other veterans to show their own specialized skills. A former Navy SEAL demonstrating water rescue techniques in the community pool, an Air Force veteran flying precision patterns with radio-controlled aircraft, and a former Army medic teaching first aid to scout troops. "That shot," Agent Chen said to her husband as they applauded, "represents everything good about finding purpose after trauma." She took skills learned in war and transformed them into something that brings joy and education to her community. Tom Miller bounced his baby daughter gently, pointing toward the grain elevator where orange paint was still visible on the weather vane. "You see that, Maria Elena? That's the lady you're named after. She can do anything she sets her mind to." Mrs. Henderson wiped tears from her eyes, remembering the terrified woman who had saved her life 6 months earlier and comparing her to the confident, integrated person Maria had become. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. As the crowd began to disperse, Maria packed up her equipment with the same methodical care she had once used with military weapons. The rifle would be secured in the police department's evidence locker, and the demonstration equipment would be stored at the community center for future events. "Maria," called a voice from the crowd. She turned to see a young man in his 20s approaching with a hesitant expression. He wore a veteran's baseball cap and moved with the careful gait of someone dealing with invisible injuries. "I'm Jake Thompson," he said when he reached her. "I served 2 tours in Iraq with the Army. I heard about your veterans program and I was wondering. I've been having some problems adjusting and I thought maybe." Maria smiled warmly and gestured toward the community center. "The reading group meets every Thursday evening at 7. Coffee and books, nothing formal. Sometimes we talk about military stuff. Sometimes we just discuss whatever novel we're reading. Would you like me to show you around the Veterans Center?" As they walked toward the building, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The attack that had threatened to destroy her peaceful life had instead shown her a way to integrate all aspects of her identity. She was still the precise, deadly sniper she had been trained to be, but now those skills served healing rather than harm. The extraordinary shot that had made her famous wasn't the paint pellet that had impressed the crowd today, or even the combat engagements that had earned her military commendations. The most extraordinary shot had been the one she hadn't taken, the moment in the library when she had chosen to disarm and capture rather than kill, showing Morrison and herself that there were alternatives to violence even in the most desperate circumstances. Inside the Veterans Center, Jake Thompson looked around at the comfortable furniture, the bookshelves full of both military histories and contemporary fiction, the walls decorated with photos from community events rather than combat zones. Other veterans were already gathering for an informal evening discussion group. "This feels different from other veteran programs," Jake observed. Maria nodded, settling into her favorite chair with a copy of the book they were currently reading, a mystery novel that had nothing to do with military life. "That's intentional. We're not trying to relive or forget our service. We're trying to figure out how to use what we learned in the military to build better civilian lives." Outside, the sounds of the summer festival continued as families enjoyed games, food, and entertainment. Inside the Veterans Center, a different kind of healing was taking place, one conversation and one book at a time. The extraordinary shot that had saved lives in the library had become something even more remarkable, the precise, patient work of helping other warriors find their way home to peace. And Maria Santos, no longer hiding from any part of who she was, had finally found a way to aim for a target worth hitting, the possibility of healing for everyone who had been touched by war. The festival would end, but the work would continue. There would always be more veterans who needed help finding their way from warrior to peacemaker, more communities that could benefit from the unique skills that military service provided. Maria's rifle was secured for the night, but her most important weapon, her ability to help others transform their own extraordinary capabilities, was just getting started.